Gospel according to John. Jesus said to the Judeans who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated, and I'm going to move. Sorry, Helen, for no warning on my being down here for preaching today. Helen is in the booth going, "Wait a minute, which camera do I use?" I will probably pay for that later. So today is Reformation Sunday. As is obvious from the picture behind me, it's a day that we often take to remember Martin Luther, the insights that he had into the gospel, and even to consider where the gospel is leading the church and us as believers today. Now, the Romans text that you heard is one of the central pieces of Scripture for a Lutheran understanding of Christianity. And there are some words in this text that we probably all assume we understand correctly. Righteousness, faith, belief, justified. So when you hear righteousness, what do you think? This is not rhetorical. When you hear righteousness, what comes to mind? Say it louder. Set apart. Living rightly. Loving your neighbor. Alignment with God. Redeeming justice. You can talk well. You can talk well, because so many times we hear this word righteousness, and there are two different primary meanings that wind up happening out in the world. One is this understanding of righteousness as being pure, as being holy, as being better than. And that leads into that second use on the negative side of that, of self-righteousness. I am good all by myself. I don't need any help. I am better than those people. You can fill in the blank of whatever them comes to mind in your head when you think that phrase. In Romans, the word translated as righteousness, dikaiosune for the Greek people in the room, which there might be two of you. Dikaiosune, I'm sorry, I forgot one. Dikaiosune for God, when we hear the word righteousness, is actually the root word for the word justice. Justice. Deeply rooted in that. Doing the thing that brings equity to all people. Righting the wrongs that have happened. And so, interestingly enough, when you hear the word justified in that passage, guess what? It's the same word in Greek. It's the same word in Greek. So instead of the righteousness of God, it's the justice of God, the justness as well of God. Look at another one. What about the word faith? Trust, hope, belief, gift. Faith has often been reduced to one thing: belief. I believe these statements to be true. And that is such a flattening out of the idea of faith into something that is more of a checklist. I agree with this statement. I agree with that statement. Faith has so much more depth to it. Marcus Borg, in an article, describes 4 different aspects of faith. And he uses Latin words to talk about them. I'll just translate them and not use the Latin. All right, the Latin scholar in the room. The first is trust. Trust. Someone mentioned that. We still use the word faith sometimes in this sense. We talk about, I've heard this said of, I have faith in this bridge to hold me up if I walk across it, right? That is the trust aspect of faith. I believe and I trust that God will keep God's promises. The second is loyalty. We still use the word faithfulness to talk about loyalty. But we want to be faithful. Or my dog is a faithful companion to me, right? Loyal to one another and loyal to God. Every morning in school, children stand and say, I pledge allegiance. Loyalty. We as Christians pledge allegiance to Christ above all else. Not to country, but to Christ. A third way of looking at faith, and another piece of the picture, is vision. It's catching the vision of God, of being able to see the destination, what God's dream for humanity is. Equity, faith, justice, hope. And then finally, of those 4, yes, belief. I agree that these things are true. But faith, if we only reduce it to belief, is really no longer faith. It's really no longer trust, faithfulness, loyalty, of being able to catch a glimpse of God's dream for humanity. So every time you see that word faith or the word belief in the New Testament, they're the same word. But they have all of those meanings wrapped up within that simple little word. I would encourage you, you can do it now as well, to take your bulletin and to look at this passage. The second reading. And mostly, I want to look at verses 21 and 22. And I want you to think about what we just talked about. So maybe take a pencil or a pen. There should be little pencils near you. And in verse 21, scratch out the word righteousness, and what are you going to write? Justice. And then in verse 22, again, the justice of God through faith. Circle faith to remind you of all of these other aspects of it. And then there's a pesky little preposition right there. Faith in Jesus Christ. Well, interestingly enough, in Greek, that preposition can also be translated as of, not in, but of. And in fact, in other places in this letter, the translators have chosen to translate it as of most of the time. But here, they chose to translate it as in. But I want us to think about it differently. It might be better translated to say the faith of Jesus or the faithfulness of Jesus. Because almost always this is what Paul is emphasizing and talking about when he talks about the faith of Jesus. So listen to these two words, these two verses, with a little different translation. But now, apart from God's instruction, the justice of God has been disclosed. It is attested by the Torah and the prophets. The justice of God through the faithfulness of Jesus for all who trust and are loyal to the vision of God for all creation. Does that awaken a new window, hopefully, on this text? Bring it a little bit more from this understanding into our day and our time? Because this idea of faith and of justification and of righteousness that we hear in this passage has been taken and turned into all about me. I have faith in Jesus. I believe these things to be true, so therefore I am justified. I am right with God. That's not what's going on. For one thing, this letter is written to a group of Christians in Rome who really weren't using the name Christian yet, by the way, where they had been worshiping together a group of Jewish believers and non-Jewish believers. The emperor had gotten angry at the Jewish believers and kicked them all out of the city. So it left the non-Jewish believers there to practice their faith for a while. When the Jewish believers came back into town, guess what? There's friction. Because there's a difference in understanding the faith and how to live it out. And so Paul is writing to them to help them learn to come back together, to help them learn that everyone has sinned. No one on their own is the best, whether you were a Jewish believer or a non-Jewish believer. But all are one. And that all have been brought into this faith through the faithfulness of Jesus. Through the justice of God working in the world. And Paul is trying to emphasize to them that this understanding of Jesus is enough to unite them, is enough to hold them together in community and not to tear one another apart. And in fact, it's actually even the same central question that runs through the entire Gospel of John. Because it's also a similar situation. It was written to a group of believers who had been shoved out of the synagogue. And they're beginning to question and say, how can we be believers? How can we follow when we no longer have the temple in Jerusalem? It's destroyed. And now we don't even have the synagogue where we can gather. Is Jesus enough? Is that enough to unite us? John's answer is a resounding yes. And Paul's answer is a resounding yes. Excuse me. We live in a time when there's a lot of friction between people of different understandings. There are different understandings of what it means to be a Christian within this room. There are different understandings of what it means to live a good and right life in this room. I hope your answer is like Paul's and like John's. Yes. Because it doesn't matter what party we belong to and vote for. It doesn't matter, excuse me, who we love, who we're attracted to. It doesn't matter what we do in life, what our station in life is, what our socioeconomic status is. Because our faith, our trust, is not in any of those things. Jesus says, if you know the truth will make you free. And John, in the writer's truth, and our truth is this. Jesus unites us. Jesus brings us together in community. Jesus is central. I became a Lutheran because of this understanding that lives in Lutheran church. And the fact that grace was not only taught as a word, but was lived out. A view of grace that allowed me to come to the community with all of my doubts, with all of my questions, all of my concerns, and to struggle together with fellow travelers, to work together to realize that Jesus is enough to hold us together, that God has made us all in God's image, even the people we don't want to be made in God's image, and we all have them. We all have them. They too are made in God's image. And if we are made in God's image, and Scripture also tells us that God is love. And as our hymn that we're going to sing says, one of my favorite phrases in that hymn is about we were made by love for love. It's right there in the first verse of the hymn. For this Reformation, let us not, as Lutherans, proclaim that we got it right, which happens a lot and has happened through our history. And we have proclaimed we got it right. The rest of you didn't quite understand it. But remember that we are all needing to continually reform, be open to change, be open to hearing the voice of God, but mostly to remember that God is love, and we're all made in the image of God. So our call, as Jesus tells us, is to love God with every bit of our being, and as a result, to love our neighbors, no matter who they are or where they are. Thanks be to God for the gift of grace